Free cash, take.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday,
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight,
climate change is a health emergency as well as an environmental emergency. So it's absolutely right that we are part of the solution. And that's why the NHS has committed to being net zero by 2040.
well, that's great, but the NHS has more money and staff than ever, but it's performing worse than ever. Do we need to sack the managers? And
that's why a Labour government would freeze council tax this year.
liar, liar, liar. Labour might bring in the widow tax, scrapping the single-person discount on council tax. Plus,
Dover Castle was christened the Key to England. Today, we're going to be finding out how it earned that title. I'm Paul, and I'm a historian at English Heritage.
thanks, Paul, but should refugees get free entry to English heritage sites? Is this a good idea? And
we will need over the next period, every year, 66,000 homes over the next 20 years, and a significant number of those need to be affordable. I can't deliver that unless the government steps in and gives us the support we need.
now Sadiq Khan wants vile prisoners to skip the housing waiting list. Yes, you heard that right. Also tonight,
there is a growing feeling of anger in this country that we are living through two-tier policing and a two-tier justice system.
Labour could try to ban Nigel Farage from presenting his GB News TV show. They're coming for him, they're coming for us. Plus,
back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
billionaires become the first non-astronauts to do a spacewalk. On my panel tonight is GB News star Emily Carver, Tory peer Lord Bailey, and ex-Labour advisor Matthew Larser. Oh, and can you guess who is the celebrity here who's saving someone's life? It's amazing, this video. I'll show you all later on. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Labour's widow tax would be a crime against humanity. Next.
Good evening. It's 9 o'clock. I'm Lewis Mackenzie in the GB newsroom. Sir Keir Starmer says the NHS is broken but not beaten, delivering a stark message after a damning report into the health service. The review highlights ballooning waiting times, A&E delays and poor cancer care. Speaking earlier today, the Prime Minister warned there will be no more money without reform and says big shifts are needed to secure the NHS's future.
Only fundamental reform
and a plan for the long term can turn around the NHS and build a healthy society. Now, it won't be easy, it won't be quick, it will take a 10-year plan, not just the work of one parliament, but I know we can do it.
Ukraine has called on the UK and the US to lift restrictions using Western weapons against Russian targets during a visit by the Foreign Secretary and the US Secretary of State. At a press conference in Kyiv, David Lammy and Antony Blinken praised Ukraine's bravery, but avoided committing to President Zelensky's request to use long-range missiles for strikes inside of Russia. Discussions will continue in Washington on Friday. Harvey Weinstein has been hit with new criminal charges as the disgraced movie producer gears up for a possible retrial. His 2020 rape case conviction was overturned in April after a judge allowed testimony from accusers not formally involved in the case. Prosecutors in Manhattan are now investigating new sexual assault claims as more women come forward. He continues to deny all allegations. A 17-year-old boy has been arrested as a part of an investigation into a cyber attack on Transport for London. The National Crime Agency says the teenager was detained on suspicion of offences under the Computer Misuse Act. It comes as TfL says some customer names and contact details have been compromised in the security breach. Now, in a sign that major changes could be ahead for the UK workforce, healthcare visas for workers, applications have plunged by 83% from April to August this year. New figures from the Home Office revealed dependent visa applications also dropped by 73%, while student visas saw a 17% drop, but dependents of students took a sharper hit with an 83% decline. In contrast, applications for skilled worker visas rose by 18% over the same period. A Royal Navy warship has seized £160 million worth of cocaine in the Caribbean, intercepting a so-called narco sub in a joint operation with the US. HMS Trent, sailing around 200 miles south of the Dominican Republic, seized 2,000 kilos of cocaine, marking the ship's 8th drug bust in just under 7 months. And taking space exploration to new heights, 2 civilians have completed the first ever commercial spacewalk. Billionaire Jared Isaacman and crewmate Sarah Gillis floated out from their SpaceX Dragon capsule 400 miles above the Earth. Without the usual safety of an airlock, the daring duo tested life support systems in the vacuum of space. Well, those are your latest GB News headlines. More from me in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. It's time for a pensioners' protest. Keir Starmer clearly has a problem with old people. He's coming after your heating, and now he's coming after your purse. Keir Starmer will be Keir Starver by the end of next year, with 17% of pensioners set to be consigned to a life of poverty under Labour. Now, it looks like he might enforce the cruel, heartless widow tax. The single-person council tax discount is a lifeline for elderly widows and the 4 million pensioners who live alone. They pay 25% less council tax, apparently. Labour are refusing to rule out scrapping that. Well, what else could happen? What's another lifeline for the elderly to have? The free bus passes, isn't it? Well, they might go too. Here's Starmer being questioned about both these things yesterday.
Following Labour's disgraceful political decision to scrap winter fuel payments with little notice to millions of pensioners, will the Prime Minister today rule out scrapping concessionary travel fares and council tax discounts, which also help millions of pensioners across the UK? Yes or no?
As he knows very well, I'm not going to preempt the budget. It will all be set out in due course.
A government spokesperson later came out and said, oh no, don't worry, we won't scrap the old bus passes. But how can you trust them when Keir Starmer has already flip-flopped on Brexit, on supporting Corbyn, on the winter fuel payments, on taxes on working people, on a big green plan, on free movement, on border security? There's 2 things people don't like about Sir Keir Starmer. both of his faces. Talking of cutting the winter fuel payments, Starmer is refusing to publish the risk assessment report, OK? Is he trying to hide how many people this would kill?
But we know why he's hiding the impact assessment. The Labour Party's own previous analysis claimed that this policy could cause 3,850 deaths. So are the numbers in his impact assessment higher or lower than that?
Mr. Speaker, we're taking this decision to stabilise the economy. That means we can commit to the triple lock. By committing to the triple lock, we can make sure that payments of state pension are higher, and therefore there's more money in the pocket of pensioners, notwithstanding the tough action that we need to take.
All of this is happening whilst the government also refuses to tell us how many migrants we're paying welfare bills for. They won't tell us. Our great old generation who've paid into the system all their lives are getting hammered by a millionaire Prime Minister. He bought his own mum a 7-acre plot in Surrey, reportedly, in her later life, but he could be about to consign millions of Britain's brilliant elderly to a freezing cold, starving, isolated existence, and I think that's cruel. Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. We've got GB News star Emily Carver. We've also got Conservative peer Lord Bailey and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Emily, I'll come to you first on this. They're not publishing the impact assessment, are they?
Well, apparently, it turns out, Number 10 have just said this, or their spokesperson has, that they never did one. So all we've got is the 2017 report that they commissioned, which said that potentially 3,850 people or so could die as a result of cutting these types of payments. So now it turns out they haven't really got one. What they may have is something related to Rachel Reeves and the Treasury, so the money side of things, but not actually how this may impact and harm so many pensioners. You know, sometimes you can exaggerate in these types of monologues and things, but I don't think you have. Older people have been surveyed. 55% say they'll heat their homes less. 40% say they'll cut back on essentials. 65% say they'll take cost-saving measures. 20% say they will eat less as a result of cutting these winter fuel payments. So you may well find that there are older people up and down this country who are not only deeply anxious about this, but who may actually stop putting food on their own plates as a result of this. And this is about priorities. It is. Isn't this? They've got money when it comes to GB Energy, which appears to be a vanity project. They've got money for international climate finance. They've got money for train drivers. So, priorities.
Sean, is this as shameful as it sounds?
I think what's really, really shameful for this, when they were in opposition, the government of the day suffered so many lectures about how they didn't care about people, how their measures were going to kill people. And at this case, Keir Starmer won't even do the impact study because I think he knows what will come back. And if you look at these things, there's two important things. It's a wickedness because they're bringing it in so quickly. Why would they do it in the middle of the year? Why wouldn't they give older people a notice so they could deal with this? And that's what makes it wicked. And on top of this, they've talked about the savings that will be made. Let people take up pension credit tax allowances or shows that. But if everybody who's eligible for that did that, it would cost more than the savings they're going to make. The bottom line is this is a political choice and have chosen to punish the most vulnerable people in the country. There are some 3.5 million pensioners who are at risk of losing that payment, who need the payment. The government don't want to do the work of means testing. That's another choice they've made. They are punishing pensioners and that isn't right.
Sir Keir Starmer and Rachel Freeze, Matthew.
Well, I mean, you know, clearly it is going to be difficult for some pensioners, but let's remember that this is going to be taken away from a lot of prosperous pensioners as well. But government is about making tough decisions, and we saw things like the two-child benefit cap, so that if you don't get any benefits, your benefits don't increase if you have more than 2 children. We saw the bedroom tax, which when I worked for the Labour Party was our big campaign, where we saw people, you know, penalised because they had a second bedroom for a disabled child, for instance, which the Tories imposed. And the same people who are now complaining about the winter fuel allowance were not making a fuss when other welfare cuts have to come into play.
If the Conservatives were doing this, you'd be up in arms. There is no doubt about that. And this council tax exemption for single households. Half of the people, more than half of the people affected by that will be pensioners. A lot of lonely, a lot of very elderly, vulnerable widows and widowers will be impacted.
I strongly think that we won't see that happen.
I hope not.
There's a very special thing about punishing pensioners. They have no ability to raise their income. That's a special thing about punishing pensioners. And they know that while they're doing it. And I come back to this. Labour gave so many lectures about cruel policy, about political decisions. This is absolutely cruel and is absolutely a decision. They spent money on train drivers that they could have spent on pensioners.
Well, you could go way down the list with all of that stuff. But, Matthew, you know, when Rishi Sunak was Prime Minister, incredibly wealthy individual, as is his wife, and there would always be the massive clamour about this. Well, Keir Starmer's apparently a millionaire. You know, he apparently, according to reports, was able to buy his mum a 7-acre plot in Surrey towards the end of her life. I think they had a donkey sanctuary on there as well. Well, there's millions of pensioners around the country right now who might not have anybody. Is Keir Starmer massively out of touch?
No, I mean, you know, his mum was ill for most of her life, and he did that for her, and he was in a fortunate position to do that. Look, I think on the council tax, I think it would be completely wrong to get rid of the single person discount. There's a big case for getting rid of council tax and changing the whole system. It's a big controversial issue, perhaps one for another day. But it wouldn't just affect lots, as Emily says, millions of pensioner households. It would also affect people like single mums. So, you know, I grew up in a single-parent household. My mum would have struggled to pay the full council tax. So, you know, I think you need to think about the impact on the law. I suspect we will hear that ruled out and the bus pass gold-plated and safe. But the government needs to be clear, because at the moment it's giving the impression, it's kind of bleeding, because it's giving the impression that it's going to come for these other things.
May I just say one more thing? We still don't have an idea, really, of where this £22 billion financial black hole is and what it's made up of it. The Treasury won't release the details on what exactly that black hole is all about. We're just told, officials want to ensure that the figures are accurate before they're published. Well, if you're justifying these type of policies off the back of a £22 billion financial black hole, show us. Show us the calculations.
I suspect they haven't released them because their mantra is because of the last Tory government would be broken with detail. That's why they haven't released them. And what Matthew said is correct about the single-person discount, but it doesn't change the fact that the winter fuel payment is being taken away from some of the most vulnerable people in this country, and it's a political decision that the Labour Party has made.
And council tax could go up, and the energy price cap has gone up.
I have never known council tax not to go up.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly. No, 100%. Exactly that. There is also this idea, just to touch on Emily's point there, Matthew, of Department for Work and Pensions and HMRC combined not telling us the details on migrant welfare and benefits, etc. They're refusing to do that. They've obviously got the data. There's a similar situation when it comes to migrant crime. I suppose you could argue there's a prison cost in that, but they're also now not going to tell us what the cost of where this black hole is coming from. I mean, they are just withholding information that is objectively in the public domain and that they are using excuses for. I mean, I put it to you that the way that this could be portrayed is that we are paying for unemployed, lazy, work-shy individuals. We're also paying a massive, whopping, great big welfare bill for people who just arrived in this country. And the people who are suffering the most as a result of this are people who've paid into the system all their lives, the pensioners.
Well, I think there are two things. I think, firstly, personally, I believe that information is power. I think, I believe in freedom of information, and the government does need to, answer the legitimate questions. I think that they will come out and publish the figures on the black hole. They did give some detail in areas like, in fact, the migration budget, which was literally the Tories were spending the reserves to try and plug that hole. I think on the second thing, I agree with you on worklessness, and actually, Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, in her very first week in office, made absolutely clear that, the clue's in the title, that Labour's mission is to get more people back into work, get the percentage of people of working age in work up. We're the only country in the world, in the industrial world, where the number of people in the workforce has stayed down since COVID. That needs to change.
Seems like it's a bit hard being in government.
Yeah.
Bit trickier.
It's quite hard defending it on the sofa, never mind making it in government.
You had a prisoner released in this early release scheme, immediately rearrested.
Yeah.
I mean, after about 30 seconds.
Well, and today, Diana Johnson, the policing minister, has had her person nicked at the police superintendent's conference.
That is like a... Well, I mean, not for her, obviously, but it is a comedy sketch.
I mean, yeah, if you wrote it in a comedy sketch, people say it's too far-fetched.
Well, I tell you what you wouldn't write in the... What it does defy reality is they actually arrested somebody, which is quite rare.
Oh, there you go.
I hope it wasn't a police officer. It was a chimney sweep.
Sorry, that's what I appreciate you were joking, but I know that's an active case, and of course, no guilt has been proven. So there we go. Right, I think we're out of the woods. All right, thank you. Lovely start. It is time now for the Great British Giveaway. Listen up if you're a pensioner, because you're probably going to need this. But it's the biggest cash prize we've ever given away. £36,000 could be all yours. That's like having an extra £3,000 tax-free in your bank account every single month for an entire year. Here's all the details you need to make that yours.
On demand. Good luck.
Do you think that recently freed prisoners should skip to the front of the housing queue? No, me neither. But Sadiq Khan does. So, is Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick right that Labour always put decent people last? But up next...
Dover Castle was christened the Key to England. Today, we're going to be finding out how it earned that title. I'm Paul, and I'm a historian at English Heritage.
Well done, Paul. But refugees go free now at more than 400 historic English heritage sites. But adult tickets cost as much as 28 quid for a single visit, plus you've got parking, haven't you, whatever you spend with you. Anyway, is this really a good idea? Going head-to-head on that are the founder of the Sanctuary Foundation, Krish Kandia, and the founder of the Global Britain Centre, Aman Bagal. That's next.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Prince Harry has got in touch with a lot of people surrounding the royals about a possible return, some sort of easing himself back into what goes on in this country, and tries to repair his image. This has been reported today in the Daily Mail.
Yeah, the major move is being branded as Operation Bring Harry In from the Cold, as he's allegedly growing dissatisfied with advice from American-based image experts.
Let's now speak to Jack Stooks. Now, Jack is a former gardener, senior gardener, top man at Highgrove there. And did you know Harry, Jack?
Yes, yeah, I did. The Harry I knew was always amazing, really good, lovely to be around. I think everybody wanted to be around him, really. He was the sort of life and soul of the family. What we've got to remember is at the time, you know, we knew a book was coming out. We knew various things might come from that. We knew that there was problems with Meghan's family, and there was a lot going on at the time. I think things have, you know, sort of been brushed aside to an extent. Whether or not the book was a mistake, I mean, he might think it was a mistake. He might not think it was a mistake. What we tend to do is we judge him on just the fact that he wrote the book. What we don't think is, why did he write the book? You know, we don't ask the questions as to there was a reason behind him having to have his story known. And maybe, you know, he needed that. Maybe he felt he just needed people to know his side of the story. Hopefully, you know, that family can forgive. I mean, not forget, but be able to sort of move on in a different way.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Now, coming up, do Labour always put decent people last? But first, should refugees get free access to English heritage sites? It's time now for the head-to-head. Now, an English heritage scheme that gives refugees from any background free access to more than 400 historic sites has raised eyebrows among members of the charity, which is partly funded by government aid. The initiative, first introduced in 2022, came to members' attention after a recent post on social media went viral. It read, "I'd just like to say how great English heritage was on Sunday, giving 30 Afghan refugee families and 30 local families access to a property for free. They all mixed, had a great picnic and played football. It was such a great day." Indeed, English Heritage were quick to respond to questions, with a spokesperson lavishing praise on the, quote, generous welcome British people have supposedly been giving refugees, adding, "We at English Heritage are determined to play our part. We think that our sites represent some of the best of Britain, places whose age, beauty and atmosphere can provide comfort in an uncertain world. Sharing them is the right thing to do." However, adult tickets for some English heritage sites cost as much as 28 quid for a single visit. Then you've got parking on top of that, probably, and goodness knows what else. So tonight I'm asking, should refugees get free access? Let me know your thoughts. Go to gbnews.com/your say. Or tweet me at GB News. Make sure you go and vote in our poll. Going head-to-head on this are the founder of the Sanctuary Foundation, Krish Kandiah, and the founder of Global Britain, Aman Bagal. Both of you, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Aman, I'll start with you. Should refugees be getting free access?
No, not at all. On the contrary, it should be our veterans who should be given free access to English heritage sites. After all, it's those people who are putting their lives on the line throughout their armed forces careers to defend our national heritage and civilization. But look, I think this is the latest in a long litany of this woke, bakwas DEI schemes that are infecting so much of our national institutions. What next? They're going to be giving concessions based on our skin colour? That's where I see this going.
OK. All right, Krish, I'll bring you in. What do you make to this scheme, then?
Well, I do like the suggestion of veterans going free. I think that would be a lovely gesture. But refugees are men and women and children who have fled war and terror and famine. They've been through a very rigorous vetting process by our Home Office, and their claims have been found to be true. So what a lovely gesture of support and welcome to offer them free access. And in fact, this will help us with things like integration, celebrating our history, understanding our culture. That's a really positive thing for someone new to our country to receive, and will help people build bridges of relationships.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, that is one of the reasons why I'm not massively, or at all really, up in arms about this, Aman, which might, shock some people at home. But, we do bang on quite a lot about integration and stuff, don't we? One of the things maybe that is quite a good thing is for people who have just arrived to Britain to actually go and learn a bit about English heritage.
Yes, well, maybe. You have to question English heritage's motivation here. Why aren't veterans given free entry? Why is it that refugees are their first priority? Surely their first priority should be people who are our own. And look, the basic fact is, when my grandfather first came to the UK back in 1959, he used to tell me the story of the BBC. Yes, the BBC broadcasting a show every Saturday morning on BBC Two called Apna Ghari Samjho, which basically translates into think of this as your own home. And, it taught English language skills, civic skills, social attitudes, and that's the type of thing that might help refugees from foreign lands integrate better, not giving them freebies at the cost of the rest of English heritage members, especially when it's not open at the same level for veterans.
I suppose, Krish, that, this is maybe one of a long list of things where it can be perceived that refugees get some kind of benefit that maybe Brits don't. So, we've obviously spoken in the past about things like housing or access to whatever else. I suppose this is another one of that, isn't it? I mean, if you are a bit skint and English, then you still have to pay 28 quid plus parking.
Well, actually, I'm a carer for disabled foster children, and we get to go free too. So again, I guess it's just recognising people with vulnerabilities or extra needs being offered special hospitality. But again, I agree with Aman. Why not offer that to veterans as well? I know pensioners get a discount. I just think this is a positive step. I met with Ukrainian refugees this week who are feeling incredibly threatened by what's going on right now in their country. And this little gesture of hospitality is just a nice little touch to say, look, we see you, we recognise you, and we stand with you.
Yeah, I mean, look, hey, Aman, I will be intrigued to see the take-up figures on this. I mean, with respect, I remain resolutely unconvinced that people in the local migrant hotel are desperate to go and have a look at Dover Castle or Tasson Hall or whatever it is. But, you know, I suppose, you know, maybe there is a case to say that this is quite a good thing. Or what do you reckon?
Well, exactly, Patrick. But I thought the last time we were hearing from all the lefty liberals crying that the countryside, predominantly English heritage, is racist. So it's not very welcoming to people of foreign origins. So it's either that or, yes, maybe there are thousands of refugees who are wanting and very actively seeking to visit our English heritage sites.
Yeah, I mean, look, like with all of these things, I do wonder how much of this is just kind of needless virtue signalling to say they're doing something, how much of it is out of the kindness of their heart. But, you know, it is unusual for me to sit on the fence when it comes to these head-to-heads, but I very much can see both sides of this. If I had a few young kids and no kind of distinguishing feature, i.e., I, you know, didn't have some kind of vulnerability or disability or whatever, maybe I would feel quite disillusioned with the idea that I'd have to pay full whack. However, I do sit here and bang on a lot about the idea of integration not being a thing and all of that. And if someone does want to go, who's just arrived here and maybe actually integrate and learn a bit about British culture, and this is a way of helping them do it, then, you know, I can't really be hypocritical about it. I've got to say fair enough. But both of you, look, thank you very much. It's a good head-to-head, that. As the founder of the Sanctuary Foundation there, Christys, and the founder of Global Britain Centre, Aman Bagal. Good stuff. Who do you agree with? Should refugees get free access to British museums and heritage sites? Matt says, absolutely not. British people should have free access to our own heritage. Everyone else should pay. All right. Laura says, of course they should. And Alex says, we should encourage migrants and refugees to integrate into British society. However, it should be at their expense, not ours. All right. OK. Well, your verdict is in. I'm quite intrigued to see what the results are with this, actually. So 5% of you, there we go, 5% of you think that refugees should get free access to British museums and heritage sites. 95% of you say they shouldn't. I can respect that, absolutely. I do wonder whether or not that is a little bit because of the perceived, well, or definite, frankly, freebies that they seem to get in other areas of life as well. But coming up, do you remember the militant boss of the National Education Union, a chap by the name of Daniel Kabidi?
West Bank, Gaza, it's about time we globalise the Intifada!
Or you could just teach some kids. But anyway, now the rail union baron Mick Lynch has got in on the action. He's compared Israel's treatment of Palestinians to the slave trade. He also lavished praise on the government for suspending some arms licences to Israel. I'm less bothered about that. I'll be honest with you about what I'm bothered about, OK? It's whether or not trade unions in Britain are going to start striking over foreign policy decisions that they disagree with. You might think that's far-fetched. I personally don't. I can see it coming. The former Conservative MP Robert Halfon joins me live very soon. But first, Sadiq Khan claims that recently freed criminals should skip the queue and get priority for community accommodation despite massive housing shortages across the country. Does Labour just frankly hate ordinary, decent, law-abiding Brits? Former Labour advisor Matthew Torbet, he doesn't agree. He joins me live and he's next. Stay tuned.
Hello, good evening. It's going to be a very cold night tonight with a chance of frost, particularly across northern areas, but also a chance of spotting the aurora or the northern lights across parts of Scotland and northern England. We've got cold Arctic air at the moment, but that will be replaced by Atlantic air as high pressure builds in for the last day of the week into Friday. So that will develop clear skies quite widely, so a good chance of spotting the aurora as far south as northern areas of England, parts of Northern Ireland too. A few showers still clear clipping the coast of East Anglia overnight tonight, but for many of us, it's going to be a clear, dry and cold night. Chance of frost rurally just about anywhere away from the very far southeast. Towns and cities should be above zero by tomorrow morning, though, and it will be a fairly bright start to the day on Friday. The sunshine's still got some warmth to it, and the winds will be much lighter tomorrow morning, so it should still feel fairly pleasant first thing. Across coastal areas, there is still a risk of the odd shower and more in the way of cloud, particularly as we look further north and west to parts of western Scotland, Northern Ireland, where there is a greater risk of a few showers first thing tomorrow, as those westerly winds are bringing in the next weather front through Friday afternoon. That will spread into parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, turning the sunshine much hazier as we head towards lunchtime. But elsewhere across the UK, it's going to be actually a dry and fine day, a much more settled day to come tomorrow compared to today. Less of a risk of any of those showers rattling through. It won't feel too bad in the sunshine. Temperatures are still below average, but it's definitely warmer than it has been lately, and it will become even warmer as we head into Saturday as well, as we pick up that westerly wind more widely. Still potentially a fairly chilly start, though, across parts of England and Wales, but it's quite windy and wet weather will push into parts of western Scotland, Northern Ireland through Saturday, and we'll see the rain persist here all the way through until Saturday evening, and then when it will sink further south into more central areas, with further wet weather to come early next week across the north. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Coming up, are the trade unions dictating British foreign policy? How long is it before they go out on strike because of a foreign policy decision they don't like? I'll give you a bit of context for that in a few minutes. But first, London Mayor Sadiq Khan has once again sparked outrage after he said that newly released prisoners should be prioritised for social housing. So on Tuesday, more than 1,600 violent criminals, sex offenders, etc., were just let loose onto Britain's streets under the government's early release scheme. And speaking to the Times' Crime and Justice Commission yesterday, Khan said, "We need to have an honest conversation with our constituents about the reasons why people who have come out of prison may need to jump in the queue to get housing to avoid them reoffending again." Well, those comments were slammed by Tory leadership frontrunner Robert Jenrick, who earlier today accused Labour of putting decent people last. Well, there we go. I'm joined now by former Labour advisor Matthew Talbot. Matthew, great to have you on the show. Thank you very much for making the time for us this evening. Is he right, then, Robert Jenrick? Are they putting decent people last, putting a criminal up the housing waiting list?
I don't know. I mean, it wouldn't be like there's a leadership competition on at all for Robert Jenrick to be diving in on something Sadiq Khan said. But I think, I don't know, that the framing of the question suggests that people that end up in prison can't always be decent people. Many people in life make mistakes, some much bigger than others. And again, you know, you alluded to it in your introduction, I will reserve judgment for things like sex offenders, paedophiles and other things. But for those that sometimes initiate crimes of potentially poverty or for want of other reason, I wouldn't necessarily say that people who've been to prison aren't decent.
I do appreciate that.
Change.
Look, I do appreciate what you're saying there. What I would say, though, is, well, what message does this send out to anyone who just abides by the law? So people who might have gone shoplifting when they were hungry but didn't and have waited on the housing waiting list, then all of a sudden the London mayor says, I'm really sorry, but this bloke with, even if it's petty crime, but convictions as long as your arm, does go above you in the housing waiting list. It feels a bit like the social contract would be broken there.
Well, I would agree. The social contract for me already feels broken in that, me and you probably always were brought up in that if you work hard and you abide by the law and you get on in life, you'll be able to afford a home and have sort of quite a nice life, and it doesn't seem to be the case. I think with regards to prioritising, I think what Sadiq said is we need to have a conversation. I think that's fair enough in many ways. I think the other thing is there are many... The evidence is there that if people that leave prison find relatively permanent housing, they don't go on to reoffend. And reoffending costs us all, through the Home Office, £20 billion a year. So I think there's an economic argument to show that certain people should be prioritised, but that can depend. Obviously, you can have prisoners that are of old age, that are potentially mentally ill or have learning difficulties, physical disabilities, or maybe fleeing violence or persecution as such from whatever they've been involved in. And I think, how you prioritise those and for those that are already on the waiting list is a tricky thing. I think the main thing is we need to be building more housing.
Yeah, we do need to be building more housing. I just think it plays into the perception that in Britain, very often, it seems to be law-abiding Brits who are at the back of the queue for everything.
But on the flip side of that, if we've got to ask ourselves, how do we wish to treat prisoners once all is said and done? If you have broken the law, you've ended up in prison, you've done the punishment. You've been in prison for maybe 5, 10, however many years. You've got a criminal record that could last up to 10 years, maybe longer. You're going to find it harder to get on in life. And, it's right that people are punished. I'm not saying, people shouldn't be going to prison for certain things. But ultimately, when is enough enough? Once you've done the crime and you've done the time, surely we have to ask ourselves as society,
I would hate for a situation to occur where one of the victims of those crimes gets bumped down a social housing waiting list for the man or woman who did commit that crime against them, though. And I'm not quite sure... I'm just not quite sure why Sadiq Khan says this stuff. Like, is he trolling us, do you think?
I think it's popular to dislike Sadiq Khan. He does say some things at times where I think, well, I certainly wouldn't have advised that. But I don't know, he's opening up a question that actually politicians may not have the courage to even entertain. The idea that, economically, it's causing chaos. The fact that we are, even more recently, in the more recent riots, we've got people going to prison that really probably maybe shouldn't be going to prison for saying things online, and whether we're too harsh with our convictions sometimes. Keir Starmer has a record of that previously with the 2011 riots when he was head of the DPP. So it also opens up the argument of whether we're sending people to prison far too easily, which the current minister would agree. He seems to think 2/3 of people shouldn't be there at all.
I do worry, right? So there's a lot spoken about, especially by the likes of Sadiq Khan and Keir Starmer, when it comes to language's importance in politics. Language really matters. Language really matters in life. OK, all right, I get that. But, we've had Sadiq Khan, who relentlessly seems to be calling out things as racist. If you're against what's going on in the Channel, then you might be a racist, and all of this, if you're against all the pro-Palestine stuff, you might be a racist, you might be a member of the far right. And a lot of that stuff, for me, comes from things that actually people have got a legitimate right to be angry about. Well, now, if you're angry about the idea that someone who's, either battered someone in the street or done some crime and gone to prison for it, skips the housing waiting list, now are we being told that we're unkind?
Yeah, I can see your point. I don't think you're unkind, but I think we maybe need to look through the other end of the telescope and actually ask ourselves, what do we want? Do we want a society that gives people second chances, or do we cast aside people for the rest of their lives, which ultimately the victim of a crime may not want, because it may cause another victim of a crime because somebody has felt they need to go and reoffend further because they've not been allowed to get on with their life post-prison.
Yeah, no, look, hey, I think we can have a perfectly respectable conversation about this, as indeed we just have. Matthew, massively appreciate your time this evening. You take care. All right, Matthew Talk with our former Labour advisor. Right, coming up, A damning report has concluded that the NHS is in a critical condition, patients getting worse care despite a record level of funding. All right, well, Starmer had a clear message for our crumbling health service earlier today.
So it's reform or die.
Yeah, but how many people have to die while we're waiting for it to reform? Isn't it time that the fat cat NHS bosses were held accountable for their mistakes? You keep seeing these reports, there's not even the whiff of the idea that anyone might be sacked or resign. Why not? I'll give you my take at 10 p.m. But first, remember the National Education Union boss, our mate Daniel Kabidi?
West Bank, Gaza, it's about time we globalise the Intifada!
And teach kids to read and add up and stuff. Anyway, well, rail union baron Mick Lynch has jumped on the bandwagon. He's talking about how Israel's treatment of the Palestinians is like the slave trade. OK. But I can foresee a future, in the not-too-distant future, by the way, where our unions, emboldened by Starmer, start going on strike over foreign policy decisions. And that is a problem. Former Tory MP Robert Halfon will be live in just a tick.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Luis Elizondo says that he worked at the Pentagon and that he knows that they have recovered material that is not from this Earth. He resigned after believing his government wasn't taking the threat of UFOs seriously. So have they been covering up alien material from us?
I don't think the claims that are being made in Luis Elizondo's book Imminent are new, but I think what we have to pay attention to is the seniority of, one, Luis Elizondo, and two, the people who recruited him, and indeed the people he worked for, which was the Department of Defence and the Pentagon.
You think that he was in a position to know about this?
Yeah, he would have been. He would have been speaking to the individuals who were taking part in these investigations. You're showing some of those clips just now that potential incursions by objects controlled by a non-human intelligence, potentially. We're not saying alien necessarily, but something non-human.
Seems a bit far-fetched to me, Andrew. I'm a sceptic.
When people say sceptical, I think as a species, we're relatively new in terms of what we do in space. But right now, we've got a robot on Mars that drives about and has a little helicopter drone that every so often comes up, flies about away 10 feet from it to collect samples and comes back. Now, a species a couple of hundred years down the line from us would have far better technology than that. So who's to say what we're encountering aren't just really advanced probes from something else that's just slightly ahead of us in the technological scale? I don't think that's too far stretch of the imagination.
When you do see things like what we just saw there, which was made public, the New York Times did a big expose on all of this, and actually, you know, the world didn't end. We weren't all outside fighting each other for scraps of food and burning down the nearest Lidl, were we? We just thought, oh, that's quite cool.
I think now we have to look at it and maybe take a step back, look at the people coming out now, talking about UFOs and thinking, is there something to this that we've maybe been overlooking?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Now, coming up, the NHS has more money and staff than ever, but it's performing worse than ever. Do we need to sack the managers? I can't believe no one's raising this. Why aren't the managers just resigning? It's awful. But first, the rail union baron Mick Lynch, well, he's caused controversy because he's compared Israel's treatment of Palestinians to the slave trade. Now, Look, this got me thinking about this issue, OK, because he's criticised the government's decision to end only some arms exports and licences, etc., to Israel. This was at the Trade Union Congress conference this week. He said, this is like somebody standing up in front of you in the 1840s and saying, I'm going to abolish some slavery, I'm going to liberate some people, I'm going to do this measure, but it's only going to apply in this very small way. And it certainly isn't the first time that the unions have got involved in the Middle East. Here's the NEU's top boss, Daniel Khabidi, speaking back in 2021.
West Bank, Gaza, it's about time we globalise the Intifada!
Lovely stuff. So he's in charge of teaching your kids. So great. OK. I'm joined now by the former Tory MP, Robert Halfon. Now, Robert, for me, this isn't necessarily about directly what Mick Lynch has said, OK? People can agree with it or disagree with it. Fine. It's, for me, this idea about the possibility of the unions deciding to get involved with strike action that might try to pressure foreign policy, that might try to be outside of their remit. I can foresee a future where that happens. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I do think it is important to call this out, because it's pretty grim stuff. Using the word slavery with Israel has got real connotations with what happened to the Jews in the Holocaust. It's a completely unacceptable language. You know, we've got to remember that Israel faces an existential crisis, not just against Hamas, but against Hezbollah as well, all funded by Iran. They had an awful massacre of their people and many hostages from overseas on October the 7th, trying to get the hostages back. For the rail union leader to come out with this kind of language is just beyond belief. But sadly, it happens too often. It wasn't just the NEU leader that you mentioned. Previous NEU general secretaries have been on marches where people have waved extremist placards about Israel in the background. And I just don't know what on earth they're doing. They should be concentrating on getting the railways running.
Well, exactly that.
In attacking Israel.
It's not in their remit, is it? The remit is, like you said, whether it's education or whether it's health or whether it's trains or whatever. But now they feel emboldened, don't they? I think they feel incredibly emboldened. And we see at every single one of these marches or every one of these things, the Socialist Workers' Party, they're there all the time. All the time. And this is what I'm worried about, that now we've emboldened these people with whopping great big pay rises. They've had a political impact. They could do it again over a political issue that is not anything to do with what they're actually supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and they just had billions of pounds given to them by the government in place of giving pensioners their winter fuel payments, it's worth remembering. And instead of looking after their workers or being happy with what they've got, they're making statements like this, which all it does is give succor to Hamas and the terrorist organisations. It's just, you know, if I joined that union, I would want them to represent my rights and be sure that I got union services. I wouldn't want my union leader to be comparing Israel with slavery, and it's just not acceptable.
Because the other thing that Labour is apparently doing or going to do is basically make it easier for people to strike. Now, the only reason you would want, as a union, to make it easier for yourselves to strike is if you intended on going on strike more. There's no other conceivable reason why. If you had no desires to go on strike any more than you've already done, you wouldn't need it to be easier, OK? And my concern is that Labour are going to do that, and then we're going to see a plethora of strike action about things like, we're not going to go to work until you stop arming Israel. We have a big foreign policy decision. Something could come up in the future. Wasn't that long ago we had serious conversations about whether we were going to bomb Syria or intervene in Libya, or all these things. Some things we got right, some things we didn't get right. But I can now see an incredibly militant union force where they decide to take matters into their own hands and say, we will go on strike unless you do this or don't do this. I think that's a concern.
Well, there's the old Churchill quote, isn't there, that if you keep on feeding the crocodile, they just end up eating you last. And that is what seems to be the approach of the Labour Party, is to feed the crocodile. And instead of, it doesn't look like they're going to get industrial peace on the railways. There's already strikes that were announced pretty soon after they agreed to give some of the rail workers, you know, billions of pounds, you know, huge increases in their wages. And now, instead of, as I say, looking after workers, they're going on about Israel. And, you know, this is not acceptable. I mean, this gives succor to Hamas, to Hezbollah, all these kind of people watching, thinking, what on earth is going on in the United Kingdom when you've got senior union leaders coming out with this stuff or attending demonstrations and saying extremist things that look like they're in sympathy with all the people who want to see Israel destroyed.
I think we have to have a serious conversation in this country about who some of these union leaders are. You look at the likes of Daniel Kobede. Now, if memory serves me right, he was elected on something like a 9% turnout. Something like a 9% turnout of the vote there to become the head of the NEU. Now, people will say, well, that's democracy. People could have gone and voted if they wanted to. Yeah, fair enough. But based on just that, he now has a massively prominent position in society. He's talking about decolonising the curriculum. He's talking about globalising the intifada. He's talking about all sorts of stuff. And I do wonder whether or not some of these unions are, frankly, just a backdoor for Marxism to have an incredibly powerful foothold in British society.
Yeah, it's a huge shame because when members join the unions, most members are ordinary, decent working people. They don't want all this extremism or political activism. What they want to do is to know that they're going to get proper services and membership services from their union. And these guys, particularly the teaching union, should be trying to encourage higher standards in the schools.
OK,
you know,
Robert, I will ask you though, Robert, you know, hey, look, things got quite bad. The unions were very angry. It's fair to say they don't seem to be that much happier now, apart from when they see payday. But yes, perhaps the Tories could have cut this off at the pass, done a bit more for them earlier on. Maybe we wouldn't end up with such, well, allegedly extreme people in charge of some of these unions. You know, could you guys not done a bit more? There was a Labour landslide, and now look where we are, you know?
Well, I would say don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You know, the Conservatives did a lot to try and contain strikes. There were going to be non-strike agreements and business service levels, especially for vital public services like the train services. We limited strikes. We made sure that there had to be proper votes in order to go on strike. And it looks like the Labour Party is going to roll back not just what the Conservative Party have done over the past few years, but actually some of the legislation that Mrs Thatcher brought through to tame the excesses of the union way back in the 1980s and 90s.
OK. Robert, look, thank you very much for your time this evening. As ever, that's former Tory MP Robert Halfon. Look, I know that there's no plans for this yet, but I can see the direction of travel in this country with an incredibly emboldened union workforce that seem absolutely free to pass comment on any given policy at all. And I can foresee a time where there are strikes based around an issue that is happening thousands and thousands of miles away. But coming up, Nigel Farage could be banned from hosting his GB News show as part of a Labour government crackdown on MPs' extracurricular activities. So, is this a chilling attack on free speech? Reform UK spokesperson Anne Widdecombe, she certainly thinks so. She'll be live in the studio very soon. But next, I'm really pumped up about this, actually. A damning new report has put the NHS in a critical condition. Basically, we're paying more money for them than ever before, we're giving them more money than ever before, and we're getting a worse outcome than ever before. Why on earth are there no calls for the fat cat NHS bosses to resign or be sacked? Why aren't they? I mean, it's absolutely abominable. There is no other walk of life where you would continue to get such poor results as the people who work at the top of our NHS, and you would keep your job. It's an absolute disgrace. That's next.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. It's going to be a very cold night tonight with a chance of frost, particularly across northern areas, but also a chance of spotting the aurora or the northern lights across parts of Scotland and northern England. We've got cold Arctic air at the moment, but that will be replaced by Atlantic air as high pressure builds in for the last day of the week into Friday. So that will develop clear skies quite widely, so a good chance of spotting the aurora as far south as northern areas of England, parts of Northern Ireland too. A few showers still clipping the coast of East Anglia overnight tonight, but for many of us it's going to be a clear, dry and cold night. Chance of frost rurally just about anywhere away from the very far southeast. Towns and cities should be above zero by tomorrow morning though, and it will be a fairly bright start to the day on Friday. The sunshine's still got some warmth to it and the winds will be much lighter tomorrow morning, so it should still feel fairly pleasant first thing. Across coastal areas there is still a risk of the odd shower and more in the way of cloud, particularly as we look further north and west to parts of western Scotland, Northern Ireland, where there is a greater risk of a few showers first thing tomorrow, as those westerly winds are bringing in the next weather front through Friday afternoon. That will spread into parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, turning the sunshine much hazier as we head towards lunchtime. But elsewhere across the UK, it's going to be actually a dry and fine day, a much more settled day to come tomorrow compared to today. Less of a risk of any of those showers rattling through. It won't feel too bad in the sunshine. Temperatures are still below average, but it's definitely warmer than it has been lately, and it will become even warmer as we head into Saturday as well, as we pick up that westerly wind more widely. Still potentially a fairly chilly start, though, across parts of England and Wales, but it's quite windy and wet weather will push into parts of western Scotland, Northern Ireland through Saturday, and we'll see the rain persist here all the way through until Saturday evening, and then when it will sink further south into more central areas, with further wet weather to come early next week across the north. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight.
Climate change is a health emergency as well as an environmental emergency. So it's absolutely right that we are part of the solution. And that's why the NHS is committed to being net zero by 2040.
Reef. The NHS has more money and staff than ever, but it's performing worse than ever. Do we need to sack the managers? Do you remember when we had an actual church service for the NHS? Do we have to now slaughter this ridiculous sacred cow? Also...
And that's why a Labour government would freeze council tax this year.
Liar, liar, liar. Labour might bring in the widow tax, scrapping the single-person discount on council tax, plus...
There is a growing feeling of anger in this country that we are living through two-tier policing and a two-tier...
Labour could try to ban Nigel Farage from presenting his GB News TV show. They're coming for him, they're coming for us. Plus...
Back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
Billionaires become the first non-astronauts to do a spacewalk, and on my panel tonight is GB News star Emily Carver, Tory peer Lord Bailey, and ex-Labour advisor Matthew Lazo. And can you guess which celebrity is filmed here saving someone's life? It's a remarkable video. I'll show you the full thing later on. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. The NHS is killing people and nobody gets sacked for it. Next.
Good afternoon, it's 10 o'clock. I'm Lewis Mackenzie here in the GB newsroom. Let's start this hour with some breaking news. The Prime Minister has hit back at Putin's threat to the West, claiming Russia started this conflict and can end it straight away. in response to signs that the US may soon agree with the UK and France to allow Storm Shadow long-range cruise missiles to be used in Ukraine to bomb territory inside Russia itself. Vladimir Putin said on the state TV that the move would change the very nature of the conflict. Spelling it out, he added, it would mean that NATO countries are at war with Russia. Earlier on today, Starmer said the NHS is broken but not beaten, delivering a stark message after a damning report into the National Health Service. The review highlighted ballooning waiting times, A&E delays and poor cancer care. Speaking earlier, the Prime Minister warned there will be no more money without reform and said big shifts are needed to secure the NHS's future.
Only fundamental reform and a plan for the long term can turn around the NHS and build a healthy society. Now, it won't be easy, it won't be quick, it will take a 10-year plan, not just the work of one Parliament, but I know we can do it.
Harvey Weinstein has been hit with new criminal charges as the disgraced movie producer gears up for a possible retrial. His 2020 rape conviction was overturned in April after a judge allowed testimony from accusers not formally involved in the case. Prosecutors in Manhattan are now investigating new sexual assault claims as more women come forward. He continues to deny all allegations. In a sign that major changes could be ahead for the UK's workforce, health and care work visas applications have plunged by 83% from April to August this year. New figures from the Home Office reveal dependent visa applications also dropped by 73%. Meanwhile, student visas saw 17% drop, but dependents of students took a sharper hit, with 83% decline. In contrast, applications for skilled workers' visas rose by 18% over the same period. A Royal Navy warship has seized £160 million worth of cocaine in the Caribbean, intercepting a so-called narco sub in joint operation with the US. HMS Trent, sailing around 200 miles south of the Dominican Republic, seized 2,000 kilos of cocaine, marking the ship's 8th drug bust in 7 months. And taking space exploration to new heights, 2 civilians just completed the first ever commercial spacewalk. Billionaire Jared Isaacman and crewmate Sarah Gillis floated out from their SpaceX Dragon capsule 400 miles above Earth, using experimental spacesuits. Without the usual safety of an airlock, the daring duo tested life support systems in the vacuum of space. Those are your latest news, GB News headlines. More from me in just over an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The NHS is little more than a dysfunctional negligence machine, and the clowns running this circus should be sacked. It's missed every A&E target for almost a decade. Last year, it came second to last in a list of 19 developed countries for saving lives when it came to treatable illnesses. We have a waiting list of 7.6 million. NHS progress is going backwards for the first time in half a century. A&E queues more than doubled. In 2010, some 94% of people attending major A&Es were seen within 4 hours. By May 2024, that figure had dropped to just over 60%. 1 in 10 patients now waiting for more than 12 hours. 800,000 children and young people are on NHS waiting lists for hospital treatment. The UK has worse cancer survival rates than other comparable countries. There was no progress whatsoever in diagnosing cancers in stages 1 and 2 between 2013 and 2021. 2.8 million people were economically inactive due to long-term sickness, with most of the rise since the pandemic down to mental health conditions. The NHS is behind almost all other comparable nations for IT systems. Crucially, it is 15 years behind the private sector. Waiting times targets are being missed across the board, including for surgery, cancer care and mental health services. Here is the killer line, quite literally. NHS hospitals are doing less work for their patients despite being handed more money than ever. Funding of around £165 billion. That, by the way, is roughly the GDP of Greece. It's got 1.3 million staff, making it the largest employer in Europe. It spends £40 million a year on woke diversity roles, despite the fact that the NHS paid out £2.8 billion in medical negligence compensation in 2022 to 23. We had a church service for the NHS on its 75th anniversary. Perhaps that should have been a funeral. Starmer says there won't be any more money without reform. But that's not true, because junior doctors got a 22.3% pay rise with no strings attached. As of 2022, the NHS had 430 senior management figures on six-figure salaries, including Amanda Pritchard, who's the chief exec, on somewhere in the region of 260 grand. Here's the leadership team in all its glory, all right? Scroll down this list here. You have this completely random assortment of individuals, like the chair, Richard Meddings, who, from what I can gather, is basically a banker, no pun intended, who obviously would have been sacked from any of the jobs he's previously had if he performed as badly as he is now. Dr. Emily Lawson, DBE, Chief Operating Officer for the NHS. Well, the NHS isn't operating, is it? Quite literally. Dr. Vin Divarkar, Interim National Director of Transformation. What's he transformed? What on earth is that job? There's not even the question as to whether this lot should resign or be sacked. And therein lies the problem. They should be so ashamed of reports like this that they resign. But no, they just stand there, like Oliver Twist with a stethoscope, say, please, Mr. Taxpayer, please can I have more money? No. Keir Starmer says the NHS has to reform or die. OK. Well, how many people have to die before that lot of unaccountable duds bother to reform it? Let's get the thoughts of my panel. GB News presenter Emily Carver. We've got Conservative peer Lord Bailey and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Emily, I'm obviously quite angry about this. Why are we stuffed full of unaccountable duds in these nonsensical jobs who are not being sacked or resigning when you see devastating reports like this?
Well, I'm starting to think the NHS is a massive job creation scheme at this stage. 1.5 million people work in this failing institution, and I think it is fair to say it's failing. Everyone is saying that now, not just horrible people on the right wing of politics, but people who are using it and people who are investigating it. I mean, you said it's the biggest employer in Europe. So apparently it's the 6th biggest in the world. So the only ones that are bigger, Indian Ministry of Defence, US Department of Defence, the People's Liberation Army of China, Walmart and Amazon. I mean, tell me, 40 million on diversity and inclusion roles. I mean, sorry, that's a crock when people are waiting so long for A&E. Get the basics right before you indulge in that type of nonsense, in my humble opinion. But there's going to be a huge amount of inertia for any type of reform. I wonder if it will die before it gets reformed.
Yeah, but then we die, don't we? And that's the issue here. I just can't believe you get reports like that. No improvement in stage 1 or 2 cancer care between 2013 and 2021. This isn't about money. This is about the people running the show, surely.
But this is a problem, isn't it? There's two things that really need to be focused on here. The NHS has always asked for more and more and more money, and the response is, we have a problem in the NHS, throw money at it. And then it's become a political football, so they've hidden behind politicians. If you looked at what happened in the pandemic, the message swapped around. We were there to defend the NHS, but my opinion was, surely they're there to defend us. But every mistake that's made in the NHS, they could just blame it on a politician, be they a Tory or Labour. I think what West Streeting needs to do is say, actually, this is about you. It's not about the public. It's not about how much the public pay. I mean, one estimate says we give 180 billion a year to the NHS. I think we pay a lot. But we've been able to make an argument between the government and the NHS. It's actually a discussion between the public and the NHS.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to happen. There's a possibility here, because Wes has the unions, maybe he can get something done. But as Emily said, it's created so many jobs, I think the unions might prevent.
Yeah, I'm not sure he has the unions on side, to be honest.
Well,
They talk tough when it comes to Wes Streeting.
Well, look, if Wes was a Tory MP, he'd have a different set of problems.
Yeah.
OK, all right. So, look, as it currently stands, we're not going to get rid of any of that bloated, ridiculous ensemble of no-hopers that apparently are directors and non-executive directors that no one's ever heard of, and no one ever will again, because they just hide behind all of these failing reports and disappear and get the gold-plated pensions, etc. So what on earth is Labour going to do to reform it, and why is it going to take us 10 years?
Well, you can't turn a supertanker around in 5 minutes, but I think, Emily says there's inertia about change. I mean, I think, to be fair to Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, and to the government, the commissioned this report within its first days, and we're now in the sort of second month of the government, and it has reported. So now the key thing is that this report doesn't sit and gather dust. I'm very proud that Keir has been totally clear with the NHS today, with everybody, from those top managers all the way down to the front line, that enough is enough, change has to happen.
I think it's actually deeply unfair that when we look at the NHS, it's always the Health Secretary of the day who absolutely cops it, when actually the people who are running it day to day are these managers. And you know what Keir Starmer's talking about now? Oh, expanding the nanny state. OK, well, ban outdoor smoking and we'll ban junk food ads because that's going to somehow turn the NHS around. That's absolute nonsense.
I agree. We need to see real. We need to see real reform, and not just the.
There's a broader problem here. Is we have given too much power to Quangos. Quangos have a brilliant ability to absorb abuse, and the people inside survive. And the other fundamental thing, the NHS needs to swap its focus. It's being used to display other people's virtue signalling politics. That needs to stop. And the other thing as well, it needs to protect our health, not just try to repair our health. If you really want to lower the cost of healthcare in this country, we need to have a healthier population.
That would be the argument the government would make. That's why it's in favour of this outdoor smoking ban, the banning of energy drinks for under-16s. But look, 17% staff increase with no consequent and linked increase in productivity.
Exactly.
That is not on.
Exactly.
The NHS has got to be better.
And the fact is, and this is it, and finally now we can officially say the NHS has, if it's the largest employer in Europe and the 6th largest in the world, behind something like the People's Liberation Army of China, for goodness sake, then it's got enough staff. It has to have enough staff. That's enough, right?
Too many.
It's got the GDP of Greece pumped into every year. That has to be enough money. And I'm sorry, but people have to do better.
Yeah, every employee in the NHS...
Make a point quick on this. I don't want to get absolutely clobbered, right? I am not talking about your average day-to-day nurse. I'm not talking about your average, day-to-day worker in the NHS, your hospital porter and all of that. I'm not. I am really seriously talking about the people whose job it is at the top of the chain to run this thing.
I mean, you've got, Amanda Pritchard, the chief executive of NHS England. You mentioned her. OK, she's got in her bio on Twitter, proud to be part of the NHS. Great, great, great. She's responded to the report, and it's so thin. It's just... Oh, it's all about the staff. They're the beating heart of the NHS. Right. Obviously, we have some challenges. We're committed to working with the government, blah, 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 blah. I mean...
Yeah, come on. I'll tell you what, resign. If you feel that badly about it, this is a shocker. Nobody else in any other walk of life would have a report this badly.
Except if they were running a Quango.
Yeah.
I think we need to be absolutely clear. And actually, I'm going to go further than you, Patrick. I don't normally do this. Oh, no. This could end badly.
We're in trouble.
But I think every single person in the NHS needs to look, and we need to stop the idea that you cannot criticise anything, you can't change anything. Yes, of course, if you're on the front line, you need management to be responsive to what you're saying, and management needs to listen to how people can do it better. But every single process in the NHS needs to be looked at. It can be done better. We literally, the footage of carrying the sort of logo down the aisle of St Paul's, I think it was, or was it Westminster Abbey? Is just ludicrous.
We just need to get some, top CEO guy from the private sector who can make things efficient, sort things out.
What we'll do, if we don't fundamentally change the NHS, we'll just continue to tinker around the edges. It's as simple as that. And it's going to take some extreme political...
I think we've got it.
...to do that. I don't, because the unions will wade in. Let's see if words can do
And it's a challenge, sure.
But the bottom line is, the first thing we have to do is not allow the NHS to hide behind politicians. The NHS is in the state it is because of the people in the NHS, at the top of the NHS. Yeah. They need to get a grip.
This, what we're seeing now, is not got anything to do with Wes Streeting. It's not got anything to do with Keir Starmer, really, I don't think. I don't really believe it's got that much to do with the Tories that went before it, because you come up against this brick wall of people who are in these positions. If I was the likes of Amanda Pritchard, or whatever the heck that bloke who's supposedly basically the chair is called.
Transformation.
There's an ex-Tory MP who missed out on that list, Jane Ellison.
I was right. I wasn't deliberate. The list was very long, but I would highlight them though. Seriously, yeah. But you know, I couldn't sleep at night if I saw that there'd been that this was what was going on in the.
But they know no one's going to blame them.
Because if it was a business,
private? How many of them go private?
If it was a business, if you put 17% more resources in and you get less out than you get 11% more out, i.e. you're putting more in and getting less out, it's unsustainable.
But just to make one political point, every time anybody has said anything about the NHS who's a Tory, Labour have accused them of privatising the place. Labour have accused them of killing babies, and that's why...
There's a little, maybe not quite killing babies, but...
And that's why the NHS has been unapproachable, because people are...
the most damning statistic in your monologue, Patrick, was the fact that we are now 15 out of 17 for advanced economies in terms of our outcomes. We've got to stop as a nation praising the NHS and say what we want is health outcomes. It doesn't matter who delivers it. We need better health service.
And we need it now.
And we need it right now.
Totally.
Not in 10 years' time, Kip. Anyway, right, thank you. Another lively start. It's time now for the Great British Giveaway. And it's the biggest cash prize. You could afford to go private with this. The biggest cash prize we've ever given away. £36,000 could be yours. That's like having an extra £3 grand tax-free in your bank account every single month for an entire year. Here's all the details on how to make that money yours.
There's an incredible demand. Good luck.
Coming up, I'll have the very first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, plus...
Back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
Well, an American billionaire has become the first private citizen to do a spacewalk. I'll bring you more on that in just a few minutes. But next, Nigel Farage could be banned from hosting his GB News show as part of a Labour government crackdown on MPs' extracurricular activities. So, is this a chilling attack on free speech? Reform UK spokesperson Anne Widdecombe joins me live in the studio next.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan.
GB News royalty with
your perfect start to the weekend.
Lucky us.
Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions.
That raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return.
And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Did you know several Paralympic GB track and field athletes are aiming to go for gold this summer in Paris? So aside from pure talent, a British firm has incorporated, get this, space technology in the materials of running clothes to help athletes perform at their ultimate capacity. I'm not sure if I believe this, but we'll find out in a sec. Trailblazing scientists, engineers and designers at British firm Rion Labs have taken an idea first used in a NASA project, and they've now developed it for over 15 years at Imperial College in London.
First of all, please can you explain to us a bit more about how and what this incredible technology is?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, our founder, Dr. Dan Plant, spent many years developing these kind of dynamic materials. That means they behave in what's called non-Newtonic way. So they don't follow the rules. Effectively, they can change their behavior depending on kind of stress or stretch you apply to it. So what you get on an athlete level, if you imagine you have a garment, it's supercharged. It's such that the garment changes its support depending on your movement or your activity or the speed at which you run.
So you're saying that it generates, what, more sort of kinetic energy, is that right?
Not quite. It makes you effectively make more out of your own energy. Spot the athletes with the wavy curves and stripes, you'll see that. So that's super polymer we have in combination with these stripes that are kind built around the way your muscles moves.
You said the difference between first and fourth place is a fraction of a percent.
Yeah, that's the very main difference it makes. So even if you manage to kind of make more of your own energy and improve your performance by 1%, that's the difference between podium and non-podium.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Coming up, I will have the very first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. But first, Nigel Farage could be banned from hosting his GB News show under a Labour crackdown on MPs making paid media appearances. Parliament's Modernisation Committee, a real thing, which is being chaired by a Labour frontbencher Lucy Powell, today published a memorandum agreeing to look at tightening rules on second jobs. But is this move actually a chilling attack on free speech and, crucially as well, GB News? I'm joined now by Reform UK's Immigration and Justice spokesperson, Anne Widdecombe. Anne, thank you very much. Now, Labour might think that they've got a tricky time getting at us through Ofcom and all of this stuff. But actually, if they can just knock Nigel Farage out of play by doing something like this, then why wouldn't they do it?
Well, indeed, and I think if you look at the whole argument around MPs' second jobs, you have to make so many exceptions that at the end of it, what you're really doing is choosing who you're going to prevent from doing second jobs. And that seems to be what's happening here. They've said, right, well, it'll be people with paid media appearances. But where are you going to stop? I mean, supposing you've got somebody who's come from the media, who's still got a profession there, who wants to make, say, a documentary. I mean, never mind present a programme, just wants to make a documentary. I did plenty of those while I was an MP. A, it didn't interfere with anything that I was doing as an MP, and B, nobody thought it was peculiar.
The only reason they would want to do this, as far as I can tell, is if there was someone with a prominent platform that they didn't like, who they thought that they could silence. And I look around, David Lammy doesn't do his LBC show anymore. Ed Balls is a retired Labour politician now, despite, of course, being married to our Home Secretary. So actually, really, the only person this affects is Nigel Farage.
Well, it's certainly the only person it affects in terms of, an ongoing, regular appearance. But what are they going to do about people who do one-offs, as I've just said? Are they going to include them as well? And if not, what possible grounds can they have for excluding Nigel?
So, conceivably, what could happen is that the Labour Party, every single day, the government, gets the opportunity to put a minister up for a morning round. They also could maybe decide which ones of their Labour politicians are allowed to do columns in newspapers, for example. But if another MP from another party wanted to be paid to write a newspaper column or do a television show, that would be banned. And I think that's quite chilling.
Well, they've got to decide exactly what they're going to ban. Are they going to ban, one-off articles in newspapers on subjects of expertise? Are they just going to do a blanket ban on anything to do whatever with the press and media? What are they going to do? They haven't actually told us, Patrick. We don't know.
No. There is an argument, though, and some people really do fully subscribe to this argument, that if you're elected to be an MP for a particular constituency, then your entire sole focus should singularly be on that. I.e., just to continue with this Nigel as the example, that the fair people of Clacton might benefit more if Nigel Farage spent all his time there focusing on them.
I can't imagine anything worse than a parliament full of people who have no connection with the outside world beyond the job that they actually do. I can't imagine anything worse. And then, of course, you start on the exceptions. You've got the doctors, the dentists. Well, they can't stop practising after, 10 years. Would you want your teeth pulled by somebody who hadn't done it for 10 years? And so the exceptions start, as they always have. And then, as I say, if you have enough exceptions, then you come down to the people you're discriminating against.
Do you think that if this did become law, Nigel Farage would just break the law?
Well, of course, Parliament can impose its own penalties on MPs who do that. I don't know what he would do. You've got to ask him that. But I think the best solution to this is to resist it becoming law.
You raise an interesting question there. It ties in wider to the second jobs issue when it comes to MPs. And I have my own theories about why Labour might want to clamp down on this. And I will just say it, which is that If you have somebody who is desperate to work in the private sector and go and make a bit of money in the city or set up their own business or do all of this stuff, that would, therefore, essentially exclude them from going into politics. So you might end up with the kind of people who are not particularly inspired by any of those things. Now, I do not want to generalise overly here, but I suspect most of those kind of people would lean towards the left, and therefore you could stack the deck with a load of lefties.
You could certainly have a very, very second-rate parliament if you've got people who can't carry on with paid interests in which, you know, they have a legitimate, not only a legitimate interest, but from which they can bring expertise into the House of Commons. You know, it's why do so many barristers in the House of Commons practice? The answer is because if they didn't, they wouldn't be capable of doing it in a few years' time.
What could the possible justification for this be, though? You know, let's have a look. So they would say, well, we want to spend more time with your constituents. We want it to be the sole focus. They could say that it might get rid of vested interest. They could say, in the case of Nigel Farage, here on GB News, presenting a show Monday to Thursday or back, you know, prior to Jacob Rees-Mogg. Well, I suppose he's the case against that, isn't he, because he lost his seat. But, you know, that Nigel can use that platform to self-promote and therefore politically promote, and that is in some way unfair.
OK, then, so you get an MP who writes bestsellers. Do you forbid that as well? Because, you know, if somebody is in the public eye because of that, you know, are you going to forbid that? There are just so many. As I say, in the end, you've got to end up making a whole raft of exceptions, and therefore you end up with a small persecuted minority, if you want to put it that way.
The cynic in me would say that Labour might have weighed this up. I've got no doubt they would deny this, that Labour might have weighed this up and thought it might be a bit too tricky to come after us through the means of Ofcom and get us taken off air or anything like that. But if they can knock out a big hitter at GB News by doing something like this, then maybe they would do that. Of course,
I'm sure that's featured in the discussion.
Well, of course, there is no suggestion of that at the moment. I wouldn't want to preempt.
I'm not saying that that's their motive, but I'm saying I'm sure it's featured in discussions.
I do wonder. One wonders, don't they? And thank you very, very much. That's Anne Widdicombe there, who is Reform UK's Immigration and Justice spokesperson. Great to have you in the studio. Thank you very much. Coming up, the very first tomorrow's newspaper front pages have landed. They're on the way. Plus, I will have analysis from my panel and...
Back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
Is the moment a billionaire became the first ever non-astronaut to do a spacewalk. I'll have all of that and much more in just a few minutes.
Hello, good evening. It's going to be a very cold night tonight with a chance of frost, particularly across northern areas, but also a chance of spotting the aurora or the northern lights across parts of Scotland and northern England. We've got cold Arctic air at the moment, but that will be replaced by Atlantic air as high pressure builds in for the last day of the week into Friday. So that will develop clear skies quite widely, so a good chance of spotting the aurora as far south as northern areas of England, parts of Northern Ireland too. A few showers still clipping the coast of East Anglia overnight tonight, but for many of us it's going to be a clear, dry and cold night. Chance of frost rurally just about anywhere away from the very far southeast. Towns and cities should be above zero by tomorrow morning though, and it will be a fairly bright start to the day on Friday. The sunshine's still got some warmth to it and the winds will be much lighter tomorrow morning, so it should still feel fairly pleasant first thing. Across coastal areas there is still a risk of the odd shower and more in the way of cloud, particularly as we look further north and west to parts of Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, where there is a greater risk of a few showers first thing tomorrow, as those westerly winds are bringing in the next weather front through Friday afternoon. That will spread into parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, turning the sunshine much hazier as we head towards lunchtime. But elsewhere across the UK, it's going to be actually a dry and fine day, a much more settled day to come tomorrow compared to today. Less of a risk of any of those showers rattling through. It won't feel too bad in the sunshine. Temperatures are still below average, but it's definitely warmer than it has been lately, and it will become even warmer as we head into Saturday as well, as we pick up that westerly wind more widely. Still potentially a fairly chilly start though across parts of England and Wales, but it's quite windy and wet weather will push into parts of Western Scotland, Northern Ireland through Saturday, and we'll see the rain persist here all the way through until Saturday evening, and then when it will sink further south into more central areas with further wet weather to come early next week across the north. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Now, it's time to bring you the first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, so let's do that. Let's go with The Independent. They've got the big picture there of Spaceman. We'll talk about that later on. But Starmer takes on the NHS. No new cash without reforms. We've spoken about that quite a lot. Let's go to the Daily Express now. Yes, that's right. Esther's Hope as key vote backs law change on assisted dying. So, this is the campaign the Daily Express around assisted dying. Now, Dame Esther Ranson's bid to change the law on assisted dying has the backing of England's first citizens' jury. Apparently, 71% of people supported a change to it. Let's go to The Guardian now. Starmer tells Putin, you started this war, you can end it any time. I'm sure Putin is quaking in his boots. There we go. Let's go to The Telegraph. Lammy, UK missiles are vital to stop Putin. A winter of defeat looms for Kiev without storm shadow, says the Foreign Secretary. They've also got a story here on the front of The Telegraph. Low-skilled migrants cost the public 150,000 grand each. Low-paid migrant workers are an immediate drain on the public purse, with each one costing taxpayers more than 150 grand by the time they hit state pension age. That's according to the government's tax and spending watchdog. The Office of Budget Responsibility said the average low earner who came to Britain aged 25 would cost the government more than they pay in the moment they arrive. Sean, you're chunnering away at that. What was it?
I just said this is the kind of thing that we weren't talking about when we were talking about the good or ills of immigration. We were talking about growing the pie, but what we really should have been talking about is the per capita effect of growing that pie. And that's what we should have been looking at. And now we've exposed some of the poorest people in the country to a competition that they probably can't win.
And for so long, you weren't allowed to question that perhaps not always immigration is an economic net benefit to this country. It's almost blasphemous to say that
It was a denial of the science.
Absolute denial.
Because I think if you have these realistic conversations, then we can have more refugees in particular. But what's happened, we've mixed refugees with economic migrants, and now there's a growing clamour to just stop all these things. I wish we'd had a more realistic conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that this has come from the Office of Budget Responsibility means that at least nobody can question that in terms of saying they've got an agenda. Frankly, people might have assumed they had an agenda the other way. So, therefore, hopefully this will allow more informed debate.
Yeah, well, look, we certainly need it. You know, it's the latest in a long line of damning stats about immigration that hopefully at some point someone bothers to do something about. But now, top Navy bosses have renamed war training exercises for Royal Marines. Honestly, you're not going to believe this. As the old names are apparently too sexual and aggressive. For example, Final Thrust is now Commando Forge. Seaman is being swapped for Seafarer. Violent Entry is now Green Salamander. And Direct Action, one of the Navy's ultra-tough courses, is now named Dragon Warrior. So is this move to softer terms reasonable, or is it a bit ridiculous? Emily, I mean, where to start there?
I just assume that most military people like a bit of sexual innuendo, makes it a bit fun. And isn't it quite important that, our military is able to be a bit aggressive? Are you allowed to say that?
This is a thing. Firstly, any aggressive term should be allowed to stay. You are talking about people who will be fighting for their lives. And look, a little innuendo is a very British thing. Who remembers the Carry On films? Don't let this sort of softy, woke agenda take away away some of the joy of being in the armed forces.
You don't think some of them would prefer to be a seafarer than a seaman?
I don't know. How do you feel about a final thrust?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems a little bit ridiculous to me. Do you remember when Penny Mordaunt, obviously departed, but once a future Prime Minister, she was in the Royal Navy Reserve, and her colleagues better in the Royal Navy that she could get the word cock into a speech X number of times, and she managed it in the Commons.
I love that we have a graphic for this. Isn't that fantastic?
I remember hearing someone saying about soldiers swearing, and the soldier turned around and explained to me, he said, do you realise that we are in the most life-threatening situations ever? The odd swear word helps us get...
I've seen Second World War movies. All they say is dash and golly.
You were going to go with that.
This is actually quite serious. This is quite serious because this puts off a lot of people who are working in the military, in the Royal Marines. They think, for goodness sake...
It might put some people...
Do I have to sign up to blooming woke word guidance, speech guidance?
And it might put some people more likely to go in because they feel more accommodated in at home. I'm trying. I don't believe it, but I'm trying to.
If you're going to join the armed forces, a little aggression is on the table. Come on.
Yeah. I think, look, there's a sensible thing of making sure that terms aren't explicitly sexist. There's a difference between calling something green salamander rather than, final attack or whatever.
Being able to understand things, isn't it, as well? It's like, you're there, you're outside, you're surrounded at a Taliban compound.
Actually,
and it's like, right, lads, OK, what we're going to do is we're going to green salamander our way through that dragon warrior before we puff the magic dragon and we use the seafarers. What are you on about?
It's true, yeah. It kind of says what it does on the tin, isn't it? Violent entry. Green salamander. What one's that again? And then it's too late.
And sorry, I green salamander when I should have magic dragon. And everyone's dead. Everyone's done, but not the Taliban. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? I find it bonkers. I mean, we're just over-sanitising this, aren't we? I mean, these are things that are
I feel sorry for the, the tough lads in the Marines.
In the armed forces even have to have these conversations.
Well, the other thing is, I do wonder whether or not sometimes this is just the stuff that they tell us, and then you get in there on day one and they're like, smash his head in, do it, run up that thing. They just haze people.
I think this is all coming from the civil service, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it?
You've got to allow people in these situations a very high level of aggression, or they lose their operational usefulness.
There are people that I knew when I was younger, who were in the armed forces a lot for a variety of different reasons. I had a lot of friends who were in the armed forces, and a lot of them, I will only describe as tapped, right? And I think we should be giving those people guns. Because otherwise they're a problem on the streets. Here, give them a gun, train them, teach them a bit of discipline, send them to a war zone.
We're all going to get cancelled.
I will say something a little bit...
send them off to a war zone. They're the kind of people that should be in the war zone.
Or male aggression is a real thing. Testosterone makes men aggressive. What the armed services often does is allow people to mature and control that and be productive members of society. Exactly. That's what...
I think women can play a full and active role in our armed services. I want to put that on the record. Who are not tapped.
No. I'm just saying some of the people I think are predisposed to being very good in a war zone, right? That's what I'm saying.
Yes, I would not be.
I'd probably be awful, right? Okay.
I'd be at home, baking cakes and cleaning.
Full dress uniform in the Ministry of Information.
Some people are made for it. Some people are absolutely made for it, and I think that we should be encouraged.
Do you know the biggest thing that makes you made for the armed services?
What?
Being a team player. That's what really makes you good in armed services.
I think you've saved the conversation,
That's good, yes. I would like to...
The armed forces?
Yeah, any one of them.
I would like to emphasise, yet again, for the sake of anyone who might be wishing to cancel me now, I'm certainly not advocating needless, senseless violence. I was making a point simply about the idea that I do quite like our military to kill bad guys. Anyway, history has been made today after an American citizen became the first ever person to take part in a private spacewalk. Take a look.
There's SpaceX. Back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
So that was Commander? All right, why not? Commander and billionaire Jared Isaacman and crewmate Sarah Gillis. They left their modified SpaceX Dragon capsule without the usual safety of an airlock 400 miles above Earth. It's amazing images. I would love to do that. I would absolutely love to. They're relying on experimental spacesuits and life support hoses to perform critical tests in space. The mission is privately funded, and Isaacman says the risks are worth it to advance space exploration. Sean?
Is it only me who thinks that spacesuit looks like a shuttle suit from JD Sports?
Other sports retailers are available.
It looks really low budget. I mean, that guy is brave or crazy, I'm not sure.
It did look a bit like he got it in the middle of Lidl, didn't it?
I
do agree,
if they'd showed me that at the sort of presentation, here's your suit, I'd have been like, I'll go after you.
But hey, perhaps it's all a big stunt and they haven't actually gone up there.
Oh! Like the moon landing. No, do I have to qualify that?
I would absolutely love to do that myself.
I would. Shall we do it?
Yeah, well, yeah, if you can
right,
afford
you generate a few billion quid.
Okay.
And we'll go up there. But no, I would absolutely... It's bucket list stuff, that, for me.
It is, but with a proper spacesuit.
With a proper spacesuit, yeah. Just made me laugh, doesn't it? Well, I say clearly. It did make me wonder when I saw that this was privately funded, but it was... Clearly, no actual astronaut fancied it.
Yes.
You know,
well, I mean, in all seriousness, as we've seen with other billionaires who've taken risks in other sort of extreme situations that maybe other people wouldn't, there is a kind of feeling that you can take risks that maybe, you know, and I think that people need to be careful. The submarine I was thinking of,
But if your suit leaks up there, no amount of billions is going to save you.
No, well,
but why he's done it? If you have all that money, you have everything. You know, when you're at dinner, you have it. But this, he can dine out on for a very long time.
But I thought that, but then I thought no one believes him. You go to a dinner party and they go, what did you do on Thursday? And he went, well, I went up to space and I went out there in an experimental spacesuit.
My left-wing friends don't believe when I say I spend it with you, Patrick, on Thursday nights.
I reckon you'd have taken the odd selfie in space. What do you reckon?
Oh, 100%. Right, OK, good stuff. Now, coming up in the next few minutes, can you guess who the celebrity is here saving someone's life? There's a little clip that we'll be playing for you. I'll show you that in a minute. There it is now. OK, so that's a very well-known celebrity. There is a kind of tragic backstory to this, so I don't want to make out that it's just a good news story, but they did ultimately end up helping to save someone's life. I'll reveal exactly who that is very shortly, and I will have the very first look at the rest of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. Don't go anywhere, stay tuned.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
When I knew that I was doing this segment this week, I feel like this week was a real homework task for me because I'll be honest, I haven't been around Scottish food much in my life, but I obviously know all the obvious. And I thought I'd bring in a selection of some of, I guess, the sort of the quintessential culinary delights of the North. I mean, we have in front of us haggis.
I think we should begin with some haggis.
So, Michael, I've never eaten haggis before. This is going to be the first time.
Well, have you eaten anything like haggis before? Have you eaten anything that is made from the intestines of an animal?
I mean, I've had things like chopped liver and, you know, a bit of offal here and there.
Well, there we are. I mean, I got a great surprise. I was holding a great... When I was in government, I was holding a great party in Scotland, and I had a lot of Spanish visitors, and I was offering them haggis, and I thought that they would be astonished by haggis and maybe repelled. But when they ate it, they said, oh, no, this is morcilla. So, you know, there is an equivalent in Spain.
Absolutely.
So if I recall, and you've probably been mugging it up, which I have not, but haggis is made within the stomach of a sheep.
Yes.
And you take the heart and the lungs and some other part of the sheep and you mash it up.
With onions, oatmeal, suet.
Yes.
And it's stuffed into the sheep's stomach. But a lot of the haggis you get these days, especially sort of the slightly cheaper varieties in supermarkets, it's usually an artificial casing.
Oh.
You know what? This is actually quite nice.
I think it's absolutely heavenly. And
it's very savoury.
To me, it's two things. Yes, to me, it's two things. It's both the taste and the texture. You quite rightly refer to the oatmeal going in there. So it's got this crunchy, granular sort of texture. Marvellous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Right, welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. I've got some more front pages for you now, so let's do those. The junk food TV ban before 9 p.m, with a total ban online in 2025. Fizzy drinks, chocolate, some crisps are among products high in fat, salt and sugar, which face new restrictions on advertising. I think we might have a little chat about that. Let's go to the Daily Mail. Same story there, plus a picture of Charlie Mullins. I'm quitting Britain to escape Labour's war on wealth creators. Let's go to the Times. They're also going off on the junk food ban. Junk food adverts banned before 9 p.m. to take the weight off the NHS. Ha, ha, ha. The Mirror, OK, so this is the last paper for you. Exclusive Amnesty cash row. It says, final insults, heartbroken families fury as sellers of knives used to kill their loved ones are given £350,000 in compensation for handing in the blades. Firms that sell zombie knives have raked in 350 grand from an amnesty despite supplying these knives in several murders, apparently. Grieving families obviously spoke of their well, disgust at this, and I think they've got a point. But I suppose then the flip side is, well, if it gets the knives off the streets, look, hey, difficult one to talk about. Let's just go in on this nanny state ban on junk food adverts. Go on.
Keir Starmer is sounding very authoritarian indeed. I know some prevention measures will be controversial, but I'm prepared to be bold, even in the face of loud opposition. He's trying to justify this all as the key to saving the NHS, which we've all been told is in dire straits today. But will it? Junk food adverts. Is that
the real thing?
Is that the cure here? Get rid of those and we'll all be fine.
You should be trying to save us, not the NHS. Again, I love this idea that we must save the NHS. The NHS should be saving us.
This would do both.
Yeah. The most important thing, though, but banning the junk food advertising doesn't change the junk food, it's still there. The only tax I was in favour of was the sugar tax. They should have smashed it through the roof, made it big, because as a parent, it is almost impossible to divorce your children from huge amounts of sugar into.
But as a parent...
He said he was going to be a standoff Prime Minister, didn't he? He said he wasn't going to... He was going to say, I'm going to tread more lightly. And
that's going to come back to haunt him.
Now he's going to say, I'm absolutely convinced the government has to do more.
But as a parent, Sean, surely you want under-16s to be banned from having these, these high-energy drinks packed full of caffeine.
No, what I want is the sugar out of it. You do one product, fine, but there's a...
All right, you were telling me how you were enjoying a couple of cakes this afternoon.
Yeah, because I'm a fat...
Subsidised by the...
I'm a fat, middle-aged man.
You're not fat, Sean.
I don't want my children... I don't want my children to be that way.
You're great, Nick. You're a gymnast.
You're in top nick.
Yeah, but the point is, if banning people is not helpful, change the ingredients.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's new regulations will come into force apparently on the 1st of October. So it's next year. So it's not this October, next year. So you've all got time to
stock up.
Stock up. Yeah.
Get the...
but they also want to tighten rules on unhealthy fast food outlets and takeaways near schools. So, I mean, again, do we end up seriously in a situation here where you're shutting down a chicken shop or something there's been there for 20 years?
You can't take away people's livelihood.
Or a corner shop. I mean, they sell sweets and I don't know.
I know these types of shops can be a bit unsightly on the high street.
Well, what's interesting...
But, you know...
In the stories, it seems to be that they're sticking to their guns on the pub garden smoking ban, which is going to... which is buried in these stories.
You can't be in favour of that one.
Well, I'm not, and I think that this... I thought they were going to quietly drop it because it was only in an options paper. But in a couple of the papers, they're redoubling days, it appears. Really, so presumably that's been briefed, that they're going to stick with it.
It goes to Emily's point. This is a Prime Minister and a Cabinet that have turned out to be very authoritarian. And if you rewind my many appearances on your lovely sofa, I told everybody Keir Starmer is going to be hard on them.
I just find this absolutely ridiculous. I find this absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, right, OK, so let's get to Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. Why not? OK. All right, so it is time to reveal today's Greatest Britain Union Jackass. Emily, who's your Greatest Britain?
Well, it's going to be the American rock star Jon Bon Jovi, who managed to talk down a woman from taking her life.
Yes, indeed. I think we've got some footage of this. It's been playing, all day as well. So Jon Bon Jovi, the American rock star, was conceivably just... What was he doing? Just walking across the bridge, Emily, was he? And he saw this?
He managed to talk down a woman from a bridge in the city who was very much in distress and about to take her life. So it's a good news story.
Goodness gracious.
He moves out jogging. Americans jog, don't they? They don't walk, they jog.
I mean, apparently he was filming a music video nearby and he's seen this and, he's got involved. Like, we don't know exactly what he's said to her, poor lady, and I do really hope she's all right now. I mean, in order to find yourself in that position.
Yeah, apparently he gave her a hug and stood with her for a few minutes. And then they left the bridge together.
Yeah.
That must be an amazing feeling to be able to save a life like that.
Yeah,
and
hopefully
talk someone out from doing something that they, you know.
Hopefully she gets the help that she needs. Go on, Sean.
Well, my Great Britain is a great British high street with the grim news that 30 pubs, pharmacies, corner shops are closing all the time on a high street. We must support our local high streets. They are vital to the vibrancy of many a community and particularly useful to our older people who don't want to use huge supermarkets or travel too far. It's very important. It's a big part of our economy as well. Support your local high street.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. Go on, Emma.
Mine is Keir Starmer, for being brave enough to say no extra money for the NHS without the reform it needs, and him and West Streeting for challenging the BMA to get on board.
All right, OK. Well, he's fighting a good fight, is Matthew, but he's not tonight's winner. Tonight's winner is honorary John Bon Jovi for helping to save the life of a woman who, again, I'll emphasise, I really hope has now managed to come out the other side of that. Right, OK, so, Emily, who's your Union Jackass, please?
Well, it's got to be the Royal Marines or whoever told the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines to wokeify their training exercises. Whoever thought that final thrust should be... What was final?
Should it be the final thrust for final thrust?
Green salamander.
Yeah,
I mean, whoever thought that was better?
OK, fair enough. Sean? Mine is Sadiq Khan for suggesting newly released prisoners should jump the housing queue. Of course, we should support people and help with rehabilitation, but housing need should be calculated on need. And there's families who are living in temporary accommodation. We spend £90 million a month in London on temporary accommodation who'll be terrified by the idea that they'll be shuffled backwards in the queue.
Yeah, OK. Go on then, Matthew.
And mine is Frank Hester and the Tory Party. The importing the Tories took £5 million from the disgraced businessman. Remember when he was caught on a secret recording saying Labour MP Diane Abbott made you, quote, want to hate all black women, quote, and that she, quote, should be shot. The police opened an investigation, Operation Brassminster, in March. That is ongoing, and yet the Tories took this tainted money to prop up their failing election campaign.
Yeah. Not a great look. Not a great look. OK, so today's winner of the Union Jackass is... It's the Royal Navy. So, in a news that will surprise nobody, my wife has won both of those things.
So it's only because you want pizza for your tea.
All right, OK. Bit of favouritism never did anyone any harm. OK, all right. Well, look, thank you very much for everybody who's been watching and listening. Every viewer really matters, so go out there and tell your friends. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll see you tomorrow at 9.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. It's going to be a very cold night tonight with a chance of frost, particularly across northern areas, but also a chance of spotting the aurora or the northern lights across parts of Scotland and northern England. We've got cold Arctic air at the moment, but that will be replaced by Atlantic air as high pressure builds in for the last day of the week into Friday. So that will develop clear skies quite widely, so a good chance of spotting the aurora as far south as northern areas of England, parts of Northern Ireland too. A few showers still clipping the coast of East Anglia overnight tonight, but for many of us it's going to be a clear, dry and cold night. Chance of frost rurally just about anywhere away from the very far southeast. Towns and cities should be above zero by tomorrow morning though, and it will be a fairly bright start to the day on Friday. The sunshine's still got some warmth to it and the winds will be much lighter tomorrow morning, so it should still feel fairly pleasant first thing. Across coastal areas there is still a risk of the odd shower and more in the way of cloud, particularly as we look further north and west to parts of western Scotland, Northern Ireland, where there is a greater risk of a few showers first thing tomorrow, as those westerly winds are bringing in the next weather front through Friday afternoon. That will spread into parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, turning the sunshine much hazier as we head towards lunchtime. But elsewhere across the UK, it's going to be actually a dry and fine day, a much more settled day to come tomorrow compared to today. Less of a risk of any of those showers rattling through. It won't feel too bad in the sunshine. Temperatures are still below average, but it's definitely warmer than it has been lately, and it will become even warmer as we head into Saturday as well, as we pick up that westerly wind more widely. Still potentially a fairly chilly start though across parts of England and Wales.
On demand. Good luck. GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Good morning, everybody. I honestly don't think Gen Z are as lazy as we've been made out. I was on GB News a couple of months ago talking about a report which suggested that they were. very lazy, very work shy, and I honestly don't think that's the case. I respect my elders, so I'm certainly not going to sit here and blame them for the slow return to many offices across the country. But I am actually 20. I've run businesses since I was 15 and 16, since I dropped out of school, and I have always been pro-office, right? So I fit right into that Generation Z category, and I think the office environment is fantastic, not just professionally, but socially for young people, especially kind of after COVID, and it halted a lot of their social plans or people going to university, etc. I think getting people into the office, being surrounded by the more senior people, the people with more experience, which is what we're talking about, older people, is actually incredibly positive. But I think Generation Z get a lot of stick in the media, and I'm often sat here debating this about them being called lazy. I guess I think probably what's different is technology is advanced, so people's jobs are a lot quicker, and Generation Z have obviously grew up with that technology, therefore in a position to do jobs quicker. And I guess that's kind of where that kind of narrative has come from, because Gen Z do really kind of go with the whole work smarter, not harder kind of mentality, which is often met with a little bit of stick.
I'm not knocking the young generation at all. I mean, I'm just saying it's by experience. Undoubtedly, they're not as hard-working as the more experienced worker, but I'm certainly not knocking them on that basis. If they had the opportunity, I'm sure there'd be more and more would want to get into the workplace. But unfortunately, I think this COVID has changed the world, and it's made younger people more lazy than older people. Older people just can't wait to, well, shouldn't say that, can't wait to get out of the house to get to work.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 11 o'clock. I'm Lewis Mackenzie in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has hit back at Putin's threat to the West, claiming Russia started this conflict and can end it straight away. In response to the signs that US may soon agree to the UK and France and allow Storm Shadow long-range cruise missiles to be used by Ukraine to bomb territory inside of Russia itself. Vladimir Putin said on state TV that the move would change the very nature of the conflict. Spelling out, he added, it would mean that NATO countries are at war with Russia. Earlier on today, the Prime Minister said that the NHS is broken but not beaten, delivering a stark message after a damning report into the National Health Service. The review highlights ballooning waiting times, A&E delays and poor cancer care. Speaking earlier, the Prime Minister warns that there'll be no more money without reform and said that big shifts are needed to secure the NHS's future.
Only fundamental reform and a plan for the long term can turn around the NHS and build a healthy society. Now, it won't be easy, it won't be quick, it will take a 10-year plan.